Please join us in welcoming Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer of United Airlines, Andrew Nocella, in discussion with founder and editor of the Airline Observer, Brian Summers.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey there, good to be here.
Good afternoon. Welcome back from lunch, everyone. Andrew, you told me backstage that you've done a lot of these conferences, and you've never had to file an 8K after speaking on stage. Do you think we can switch that?
Though, right? You're going to
challenge no, I'm not. I'm not optimistic, but
give it a try.
Yeah, I will try. It's a good time to be at United Airlines, right? Are you pretty happy with the summer quarter?
I was very happy with the summer quarter and Q2 as well. I think Q1 a little bit less so, obviously, but I think where we are, what we're doing, it's all like coming together, and we're gaining momentum. So I'm very excited to be at United and see what we're doing.
Okay. So it was really Longhaul that led United in the summer, right?
You know, we have like the best long-haul network of any U.S. carrier, and measure it objectively any way you want. I think you come to that conclusion. But we made a solid profit domestically too. So there's this whole narrative that domestic is not good, and it's just not our narrative, right? Our narrative is domestic doesn't make the same margins as international, and we've said that many times. But both were very good. International was better.
Okay, so solid profit.
Solid.
I got a couple text messages after the earnings call, and they were like, "Well, I bet the domestic profit was like 0.1%."
No, real number.
Okay,
absolutely a real number.
Long haul, which regions are performing the best for you guys right now?
Really, everything long haul has just been, this summer has been amazing. There's just an incredible amount of demand. People are still, I think, recovering from the pandemic in many different ways. And whether it's the Atlantic or the Pacific or long-haul Latin America, I think that's good. I do think there are certain close nearby markets in Central America and Mexico, Cancun being a really good example, that are pretty saturated. But most of the long-haul are doing great.
So you know the naysayers, you've heard some of them. I won't say that Bob Jordan from Southwest was a naysayer, but he said, look, long haul, this can't last forever, right? This is kind of a revenge travel thing. Your thesis is different, though. You're buying hundreds of wide-body airplanes. You think this is going to last a long time, right?
Well, our take on this is it's the market here in the United States is more mature, that we have multiple different type of carriers serving all these different markets, and that ultimately, particularly as you approach the end of this decade, there's the growth in the United States is going to be very much tied to GDP, and the growth rates of 7 or 8 or 9% for the industry are just not going to be possible. But growing overseas, we think there's just a lot more opportunity. And at the end of the day, it's not that it's just so amazing on average. It's amazing when you have the 7 gateways that United Airlines has. When you're talking about flying from New York and Washington going across the Atlantic, that's the place. Our San Francisco and Los Angeles across the Pacific, our Houston to Central America and Mexico. We were just, I'd say born on second or third base when it comes to global long-haul flying. And when I got to United, and Patrick, as many of you know Patrick, we decided that we were going to take advantage of our structural advantages. And that's exactly what we did. We de-emphasized the things that don't work. We don't have a hub in the Southeast, and we don't worry about it, right? You just don't worry about it. It's not going to happen. But we do have all kinds of other great, amazing assets that just weren't as loved as they needed to be. And we've been working for years, and I think it's all kind of coming together. And the other big thing we did was really reducing the RJ fleet size. I think it's been fundamental to United, but also fundamental to our competitors. We were spilling traffic left and right, flying Newark, Atlanta on our 50-seat regional jet without any first class. And we just don't do that anymore. And that's just been, I think, just revolutionary for United.
Okay, so you have a competitor here in this region, and the chief commercial officer over at this competitor talks about we connect more O&Ds domestically than any other airline, and that's the competitive juice there. I think you were quoted recently as saying we don't have to connect every single O&D in the country.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Why not?
Look, one of the most amazing things that's happening right now that everybody I think should take notice of is there are different business models across the whole spectrum of all the biggest airlines in the country. And each of us is staking out what we do best, right? And so I'll let who you're referring to talk about what they do best.
He likes to talk about what he does best.
Yeah. He's a great guy. I love him. And at the end of the day, we are just going to do what we do best. And look, we tilt more towards global long haul than any of our competitors. And then there's a competitor that's based nearby here that's a lot more tilted towards domestic. And then there's everything in between. And then you have low-cost models, you have big airplanes, you have small airplanes. And what I love about this is instead of all of us being the same and all of us producing the same profit margin, we now get to prove which business model is best. And we'll just let one number stand for that, which is the profit margin at the end of the day. And I think you can look at the numbers and see the momentum in the different business models, and you can come to your own conclusion. What's the best model for today? This industry is cyclical. Things change. In the last cycle, domestic was better than international. But the current cycle, we expect to last a really long time and for domestic to be mature. So we think we're in the right spot and we're plowing ahead.
All right. So you've bought all these new 787s that are coming. Patrick Quayle
just
jokes.
A few. There's not a lot.
Patrick Quayle jokes. I think he had this joke when you and I spoke in Istanbul earlier this year that he has these ideas for new routes for the network, and you, an airline nerd through and through, have to look up what countries, what markets he's talking about.
I have to use Siri and I'm like, what in the world is he talking about?
Are we going to see United fly to places that no U.S. carriers ever even?
You're only going to see United fly to places that produce profit.
Okay.
Right. I mean, it's just fundamental. That's what we are, a for-profit business, and that's just fundamental. The difference in why United can consider these places, whether it be across the Atlantic or the Pacific, is our hub structure and our unique brand and the aircraft we have and what we're doing. I've been at a lot of airlines, small and big, domestic and international. This is United's forte, right? This is what we do well. We can fly profitably to almost anywhere around the globe. That includes flying to our partner hubs, but it also includes flying right into London Heathrow, where nobody's going to help us, right? And we have 22, 23 flights a day at London Heathrow. We do really well. And it's because of where our hubs are. And that's a structural advantage, and we're going to push it and continue to push it.
All right. It's interesting you said London Heathrow really well, I think was the quote. You've said on earnings calls, and you told me earlier this year, it's actually not been as strong as you had hoped it would be. Now we're going into the winter. How are things looking there?
Well, I have high expectations for all of it. I want all of it to produce gigantic margins because, quite frankly, the more money we make, the more we can invest back in our people, in the communities we serve, our aircraft, and buy more aircraft and improve the product. It's really important. So is London back to where we'd want it to be? No. Is it solidly profitable? Yes. That's the simple answer on that. And I think that there are other markets around the world that are like that. But London, it was a particularly heavy corporate business. And as we all know, that part of the recovery has lagged for the most part.
Okay. Your quick answer before about new long-haul routes was you want routes that are profitable.
Right.
But this industry has a history of what they call strategic flying, right? It's not profitable today, but you go into this city in China, and in 15 years, you're going to be glad that you went there. What do you think of strategic flying, and then what does it mean to be profitable in 3 years? If it's profitable, is that okay?
Yeah, the idea that you're investing in the future constantly, that you'll be profitable 5 or 10 years from now, I don't think we really buy into that. These routes need to get up. They need to be solidly profitable within year 2. There's definitely in year 1 always some RM issues in terms of how you're priced, what type of demand to expect, when the booking curve is going to come in. And sometimes you're a bit more risk averse, and that causes you to undersell on the yield. But you learn the lesson in year 2, the market should be profitable. If it's not profitable in year 2, you have to really start scratching your head whether it's ever going to be profitable. And developmental flying, it's like putting stuff on a credit card. You can do some of it, and you can work to make it work. But at the end of the day, if it's not going to work, it's not going to work.
And you said, I think on the earnings call, 1% of your flying is considered new flying right now?
So we've been really focused on just in the United States in particular, and the U.S. number I was quoting, and I think only 1% of our capacity this fourth quarter is new relative to the fourth quarter of 19. And some of our competitors are just off the charts with new flying over that time period. And the amazing thing about this business is data, and we can just see the RASM impact of the new flying, whereas we chose to really focus on gauge. You say gauge all the time, and I think it's been a very successful strategy.
Great. Are you ready to geek out over revenue management?
Oh, we'll give it a try. That Dave Bartels, who works for me, is our geek out RM guy. And he's just amazing because not only is he good with the strategy, he's good with the black box. Like the rest of us look at that black box and say, well, what's going on in there? And Dave actually knows what's going on in the model itself. So I'll give it a try.
Oh, this is an easy one. And we've spoken about it in the past. United is one of the only carriers that I know of that's doing real continuous pricing, right? It's not just experimenting. You're not using the fare buckets of old. You can basically charge any price for any route that you want, right? And
I've always been able to do that.
You're doing it. So tell the audience what continuous pricing is and how it's working for United.
In the past, you just had these buckets and these very discrete price points, and you couldn't price in between the buckets. And there's a lot of opportunity because there's sometimes a really large gap between those price points. And now with continuous pricing, we can go in the middle. And we can put the right price point out there for every flight in a way that we couldn't do before. I mean, technology is amazing. Where all this will be 5 or 10 years from now, who knows? It's just stuff we couldn't do in years past. And so these fares are available. They tend to be available at NDC and United.com, but it's been very successful. And quite frankly, most of our big partners have seen this and moved towards more direct selling with United to get access to these fares. I think it's been amazing.
Have you seen anything interesting about consumer behavior? Because now you can move the fare pretty easily, very quickly,
right? We just have the ability to sell at more discrete price points between the published fares.
Yep.
I think it's sometimes it leads to a higher fare, but most of the time it leads to a lower fare. So I think it's a consumer benefit, but we also think it's a benefit to United. Most of the time when we say lower fares, you think, is that the right thing? But in this case, this technology has been really unique and really helpful. I don't think we were the first airline to do it, and we're definitely not going to be the last airline to do it.
Okay. Another RM question for you. I hear a lot of airline people, this is probably not the right phrase for it, but they tend to freak out. There's this idea that you must build the base, right? You have to get enough people to buy tickets far in advance so that you know you sold some of your airplane. And then it's like, well, are we behind last year? And if we're not behind last year,
right.
do a fare sale. You always talk on the earnings calls about running a tight operation with RM. You're like a bit of a gambler, right? You like to save seats until the end?
I do like to go to Las Vegas. It's a little saturated apparently, but I still like to go.
Yeah.
Look, you have to look at these demand trends, and the models are fantastic. And United has a homegrown model. But there are times where you need to override and put user influence on these things. And for the summer of 2022, I remember going down to Dave Bartels and saying, this is going to be an unprecedented level of domestic demand. We need to make sure we don't sell out too soon. And so we're really careful. And I think if you look at our history over the last 8-12 quarters, our yield performance has been very good. And again, I don't credit me, I credit Dave Bartels and a great team that works for him in terms of making sure we sell the right price points, that we keep seats available up until the time of flight so we can sell them at the time of flight. Otherwise, we'd sell out too soon.
But the corollary to that, the things that other airlines worry about, is then the load factor ends up, the people don't show up and the load factor ends up lower than it should be, right? You don't worry about that?
I don't worry about that.
No.
Lower load factors are okay. It's at the end of the day, having a few less seats or a few less people on the plane, we don't want to do that all the time, but it definitely helps the operation. During irregular operations, we have more seats to work with. So our goal is not to maximize load factor. That doesn't work for us.
Okay. You talked earlier about airlines with different models. The way I see it, and you may see it differently, and you're the boss here, but United has gone for a premium model, certainly more premium than when you showed up at United. When you walked through the door at roughly the same time as Scott Kirby, the CEO, was this just obvious to everybody on day one, we're going to go premium, or did you look at other models, places to take United?
Well, we spent a lot of time looking at our 7 hubs and our passengers and what they wanted. If you go back to those years, you had a different business model that was producing margins that were dramatically higher than United's. That's just the reality of it. It would have been easy to say, well, that business model produces 15 or 16% margins. Why doesn't everybody do that? And we quickly staked out the fact that we needed to be uniquely United, a term that I used a lot around United. We needed to find what our structural advantages were, because I don't think we can copy airline X, Y, or Z and outdo them in any way. I would never do that. And we just looked at all of the inherent strengths, the decisions we made, where we flew, how it worked. And you know, I've seen a bunch of airlines in my days, and it didn't take long for us to like plot out a strategy and then start acting on it. And we've been more or less on that same road this entire 6 years. There's no guardrail to guardrail action, and hopefully everybody can see that in our strategy. In the summer of 21, we were very vocal about our strategy, calling it United Next, using gauge as a driver. We're never trying to just maximize capacity. We were trying to maximize gauge, and that resulted in more capacity, but it wasn't the primary motivation. It was gauge. And so we looked at what we did well, and we really focused on it. But most importantly, when we look at the people that live in our hubs and all the communities we serve, we're thinking about diversity of products, choice. The idea that people don't want choice is just silly. Like sometimes you do want to sit in first class, sometimes you want to buy basic economy and everything in between. And the idea that you just are not going to provide choice to all the people of Chicago or wherever you're flying didn't make any sense to us at United. And so we plowed forward with a choice model, with a diversity of revenue streams, with a global network, bar none. We kept all the wide bodies in the pandemic. We parked them temporarily, but we didn't park them out. Now they're all flying again, and I think the results speak for themselves.
Do you ever think to yourself, I'm the guy that charged for water at US Airways, and now I'm putting screens on every airplane?
Yeah, I had to bring that up, right? Look, what I would say is I've been at a few airlines, I've been around the block, and every single airline is different, and don't approach it the same way. And again, it's amazing that we all have very different business plans, because we get to see which business plan is going to work and not work, or how well, and time will tell on these things. But for United, we are a premier airline. We have fantastic hubs. We have a range of products, and we are very consistent with what our brand means to us and the communities, and we do things that make sense for our brand and our network, and I think we do it pretty well.
All right. You may or may not remember this, but we have a bit of a running gag because I think that United has been premium in all ways. Of course, I fly United all the time.
I know it's coming now.
Except the food has not been very good. And people,
you don't like the vegan meatballs?
Some of them are okay, but mostly they're not. But interestingly, some people on your team have told me that you, the chief commercial officer, have personally taken over the project to improve the food.
Have.
And you are extremely hands-on for an executive at your level.
I'm more hands-on than I should be, but we came out of the pandemic, and this is one of those things in the bounce back, because we always called it the bounce back. This is one of those things that we didn't bounce back as well with, in my opinion. And part of it was we changed the process. An incredible amount, I think 165,000 meals per day that we serve in our premium cabins. It's a lot of food. And so we didn't bounce back out of the pandemic the way we'd like. I got involved with it about a year ago, and it's an amazing feat, but it takes about 8 months to change the menu on an airplane. You would think, just snap your fingers, but just like everybody else complaining about supply chain problems, the same issues are related to food. And we spend almost $2 billion a year on food, by the way. This is a big budget. Yeah, that's a lot of food. But we have made incredible progress. We haven't been out there with press reports and press releases, and we did a Polaris event, for example, in New York a few weeks ago that was very successful, and we didn't feature the food because we still want to make it better. But I can tell you, we measure everything at United Airlines, and the scores we're getting on the food since we started changing Polaris in July of this year, and we did it by region, and we just in fact upgraded London Heathrow to a new Polaris menu on September 1st. The scores are off the charts. And we will talk about it more in the future as we have a lot more to say, but we've changed the wines, and we're about to change the bread, all the new entrees. I think we've come a long way, and I do occasionally read the blogs, I have to admit it. And the blogs have been a lot more kind on this subject, but our promise is to continue to invest and make it even better. But I do think if you fly United today, the food experience is dramatically better than where it was a year ago.
All right. Presumably, you're not improving food for just food's sake. Does your data show you that you can kind of earn a revenue premium if the food is better?
We definitely earn a revenue premium. Look, what I would say is, instead of micromanaging every single one of those decisions and say, well, if we add an olive, the NPS score goes up by X, Y, or Z, I think that's a little bit silly, as you can imagine. There's a certain brand that we are as United, who we want to be and the products we want to offer, and we know food is an important part of the United brand. It's not an important part of other airlines, right? And that makes complete sense to us. But for United, it is a part of the experience. We work very hard at it, believe it or not, and we're making a lot of progress. But we will continue to recognize that given where we are, our global nature, the length of our flights, that food's an important element of what we do on board.
All right. I want to shift gears a little bit and ask you a question that I don't think anybody's asked you yet, but
okay.
I think it's kind of interesting. We have a lot of airlines out there who believe that the employees must come to the office. We're an airline. This is how things work. And United, since the pandemic, you guys have done it a little bit differently, right? On the commercial team, you don't have to be in the office, as I understand it. You don't even have to live in Chicago. So, what is that?
That's a little extreme.
Okay,
right?
well,
we don't have everybody living in Chicago. We're a big global airline.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that, and we're everywhere at all times. Even the best of times pre-COVID, our in the office number was about 66% on average. Like literally 1/3 or so of the people were always traveling, and so we were always out of the office by our nature as a travel company and a global company. Where we are today is trying to strike the right balance of being in the office and out of the office. Because there are times being at home and just running through your Zoom meetings, 1, 2, 3, all day long is super efficient. But there's also times where you need to be in the office, where you need to develop people, particularly the young people. Because I just think it's just so much better to be in the office. So we have a balance. Our goal is to be roughly in the office approximately 50% of the time. And remote the other 50% of the time. We'll see if we get there. It's evolution. This is important to our team members, so it's important to us. I don't think what we do today will be what we do a year from today, because it's going to continue to evolve. But we try to provide flexibility for as many team members as we possibly can. So some of them do live outside of Chicago, but when it's time to be in the office, they need to be in Chicago, and they are.
Do you think those policies get you better talent?
Well, I'd like to think they do, but I don't know for sure. It's hard to measure. But it's going to evolve. Is my take on this. And I think right now we have a really good balance, but we'll see what the business needs. If it needs more in person, we'll be there more. If it needs less, I don't think we'll do less.
Should we take some audience questions?
Sure, I'd love it.
All right, a nice juicy one here about frequent flyer programs. I think as most people here know, Delta made major changes to its frequent flyer program to address customer experience challenges. Is United
That's a lot of big words.
Similar changes. Are you going to gut the frequent flyer program?
No, in fact, I think I said it on the last call. We think about, particularly for the Premier population, how to make sure that every one of our Premier members has a really great set of benefits. Because it is finite. There's only so many benefits that we can put into these programs. And so we, during the pandemic, made sure that we were working to size the program so that in 2024 in particular, it was the appropriate size without having to make any sharp turns. And that's where we are. We already said we won't be making any sharp turns. We'll make some tweaks to the program. We do that every year. So I expect some few minor tweaks for the 2025 year.
Will I have to spend more money on United to get my beloved status?
Well, you have to. What level do you want to be?
What level do I want to be, or what level will I be?
There you go.
I'm usually gold. I'd like to be higher.
I don't think you'll have to spend more money. And I do think we're going to make it easier on the credit card side to combine credit cards to get status. So right now, I think the rules are a little clunky and just hard to understand, and you can't combine things on credit cards, and we're actually going to make that easier.
When is an airline really going to get that right? It seems like there's so many things that go into whether I earn status or not.
I mean, we changed.
Do you understand
first.
all your acronyms at United?
No, there's a lot of them. But there has to be. We went to a value-based system a number of years ago. We suspended the value-based system for a while during the pandemic for the obvious reasons. And then we helped people get to the right number based on where they were in their spending or where they lived around the globe, because the recovery was in different areas. And I think, it's never perfect, but what we did do is make sure that the premier population size was appropriately sized for 2024 and 2025 and beyond, and therefore we don't need to make major changes.
All right, another audience question here. I think it's a good one given the circumstances. How much do geopolitical issues play a role in United's business performance?
They play a big role, right? We need to be really flexible with the aircraft and where we fly. Even during the pandemic, we continued to fly when many other airlines stopped flying. We continued to fly to Australia. We were the only way nonstop to get from the United States to Australia for a long period of time. We delivered, all the equipment, medical equipment to India during the worst of times because we continued to fly there. And we're going to have to be really flexible given things that are happening around the globe. Israel is a really good example of. Israel is almost 2% of United Airlines, and we're unable to fly there today. So it's a big deal. We talked about it on our earnings call. We look forward to getting back to some level of normalcy, but I also expect that's gonna take some time. So we need to be really flexible with the capacity and be able to move it around and deal with these geopolitical issues as appropriate. But it's something we do spend a lot of time on. We spend a lot of time looking about events around the world, and while these things are very difficult for us to predict, we do have a lot of outside help trying to help us understand what's really going on in the ground all around the world to make sure that we can make the appropriate decisions for the safety of our crew and our team members and our passengers.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm afraid we didn't say anything that was worthy of an 8K, but I will try next time.
Next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thanks, everybody.